Welcome, everyone, to tonight's call. We're excited to be here with you and with Nora Bateson. And there's been an ongoing conversation with Nora over the past years. We first met her, the Pocket Project, during COP27. And we deepened the conversation. That's the UN Climate Change Conference. We deepened the conversation last year. And we're really happy to now continue this conversation today. And especially in the framework or leading into our trauma-informed women in leadership training. The call tonight is under the title of Finding Our Voice in Times of Complexity. Navigating a World in Crisis. And it's really in response to many of you. As you might remember, we had around 800 women mainly responding to our questionnaire about what is it that you most want to learn in the course. And another 250 to 300 German women also responded. And this was one big need. How to know when to raise our voice, how to raise our voice, what are the words that can be spoken that instigate change, how do we find them? So a lot around that, and how do we speak authentic words so that speak both our truth, but also, don't inadvertently recreate the past, but instead unstick the systems that we are a part of. So many of you might know Nora. Nora is an award-winning filmmaker, a research designer, a writer, educator, and international lecturer, as well as president of the International Bateson Institute. I really invite you to go and check out the website. Maybe not now, but it's a beautiful, interesting, deep website also, and she's based in Stockholm, Sweden. Her work asks the question, how can we improve our perception of the complexity we live within so that we may improve our interaction with the world? Nora also directed and produced the documentary An Ecology of Mind, portrait of Gregory Bateson, who was her father, beloved father. And her work brings together many fields of biology, cognition, art, anthropology, psychology, and informational technology. And bringing all this together into a study of the patterns in ecology of living systems. Her book, Small Arcs of Larger Circles, was released by Triarchy Press in the UK in 2016 and is a revolutionary approach to the study of systems and complexity. And Nora and I were just speaking before the call, and she shared that a next book is going to be published and coming out in November. And if you see Nora somewhere on your screen, you can see her excitement about the book already. So it's really building on a blog post and an article that she wrote on tearing and mending, which is so close really to the work of the Pocket Project. And the book itself will have the title Combining. And I'm already excited to announce that we've decided to, in a way, complete the course of Trauma-Informed Women in Leadership with another call with Nora about the content of this book, also to invite you into it. So with that, I would love to really warmly welcome you here, Nora. Thank you very deeply from all of us for taking the time to be here. I know you're also currently caretaking your 94-year-old mother. And we know how busy the life is of women who care and lead and inspire in the world. And I'd love to start with a question. This is in a way an introduction or an inspiration around the course on trauma-informed leadership, which is also about daring to step into spaces where love and power meet. And you wrote, I'll just read a quote to you back from yourself. Whatever leadership used to be, it used to be. Now it has to be something different. Now we all have to be more than we were. And the kind of leadership that I want to explore may not be identifiable as leadership at all. I am interested in a kind of mutually alert care and attention to the well-being of all people and ecological systems. Yeah, and you call this kind of leadership liminal leadership, which cannot be found in people, in individuals, but rather between them. Liminal leadership. So I would love to start by asking you to share more about liminal leadership and also any connections you might see with trauma-informed leadership. Over to you.
Hi, it's wonderful to be here with everyone. And thank you for the beautiful opening, Kosha. I'm looking forward to this conversation and to see where it goes. So this term liminal leadership is easy to kind of plug in as a meme, and I just want to not do that. If you can just hold it as something that is between us, something that is between institutions, something that's between all of these ways in which we are accustomed to thinking about leadership are all dangerously laced with ways of thinking that are really going to keep catching onto individualism and various deeds and the idea that somebody provided some pathway and that it was the somebody that did that. And if you take a moment and you think about standing in a forest, let's say it's a forest of fir trees, okay? And there's one tree that's huge. It's so much bigger than the other ones. Did that tree become extra by itself? No. For whatever the circumstances are, whatever the contexts are, whatever the relationships in that part of that forest, that tree managed to be the one that was given more nourishment. I think it's a big mistake to look at shiny objects and larger than life situations as leadership. That possibility is made from within multiple other relationships and a system that is already predisposed toward a particular type of movement. Now, let's take it from another direction. Maybe you are a musician, maybe you're an actor, maybe you've played a little bit with improvisational dance or theater. And if you have, what you know about improvisation is that it requires everybody who's on stage to pay attention. It's a particular kind of attention. It's a particular way of listening, of perceiving, of receiving the information of what's happening in the context around you. So that there is a sensitivity to when and with what tone, in what direction you can bring something, and then also how to step back. That you have something to give and you have then to step back. So this idea that I am a leader or you are a leader makes us get distracted. And I just want to again say, in that improvisational way of looking at it, like an ecology or a meadow, an ocean, what's possible is the vitality that's generated between the organisms, the symbiosis, the finding a way together. And that means that we have to pay attention. So might that be trauma-informed leadership? That's a tricky question because I don't know, after the last several hundred years of institutional exploitation and violence, I don't know how it could not be. I'm not actually exaggerating when I say that. I think if we look at the history of how our health systems or our school systems were put into place, they were premised upon statistical curves and Gaussian ideas of what normal is. And everything that wasn't normal was abnormal. And it either needed to get fixed or it needed to be eliminated. This was, the mid 1800s. School is traumatizing, even if you do well in it, even if you happen to have an aptitude for that way of being in the world. It still asks you to not pay attention in exactly the way that I was just saying we must now pay attention. We are taught, this is math class, this is English class, this is French class, this is history class, this is science class, this is art class. These are different things. But if you tell a story from your life, any story, that story is going to have every institution in it. It's going to be the economy. It's going to be political. It's going to be family. It's going to be the health industry. Every aspect of our world is going to be in every personal story that you tell. And I'm saying that because it seems sometimes abstract to say that we actually live in the liminal space. We live in the in-between. That's where we live. Because that's where all the things are coming together. And if I tell you the simplest story, okay, find a simple story. Today I was taking my mother to go get her glaucoma medicine. And I got lost in downtown Stockholm because driving in downtown Stockholm is still a mystery to me. And I ended up parking in a place that wasn't exactly legal, but I thought I'll just run in and get her the medicine and she can sit in the car and it'll be okay. And it wasn't really that okay. I managed to not get a ticket, but it wasn't really that okay. And I felt really bad. I felt like I had been a bad person. I was a bad citizen. I was a bad girl. Um, and then we drove home and we had lunch. Okay. That's like not even a very interesting story. But in that story, you've got intergenerational understanding. You've got the feeling of interfacing with a world that can actually pass judgment on whether I'm a good person or a bad person. We've got all kinds of aspects of transportation, just the tiniest little story. All of these things come together. So when I say that the leadership needs to be in that same space, essentially what I'm saying is that we're living there. It's nobody's job to take care of the liminal space. There's no board of directors for the liminal space. There's no bylaws. There's no jobs there. There's nobody actually. It's like it doesn't exist. And yet that's where we live. It's fascinating, actually. I don't know how many times in my life I have had the experience of being in some kind of interaction with something, whether it's trying to call the phone company or trying to deal with a doctor's appointment or trying to get my car fixed or whatever it is. And it's your call is important to us, push 4 if you want this and 3 if you want that, and none of the things match up to anything that I need, and there's not a human being, and could you please just send us an email? But I don't want to send them an email because I know they're not going to write me back. And I just need to do this thing, and then I call, finally I make it through and I find a human being and I say, "Here's the context of the situation." And they say, "I'm sorry, that's not our policy. That's not my job. I understand that this is your context, but nothing I can do about that." I'm pretty sure that every single one of you has had that experience, at least maybe once a week for the last 10 years. If not, you're doing great, or you're really living in the bush. So essentially what we are being told in this kind of Kafka-esque way is that it's not possible to make the communication that joins the actual contexts of actual life that you're actually living in. It's no wonder. It's no wonder that we're feeling fragmented. It's no wonder. And this extends even into our understanding of our own identity. Who are you? And I sometimes in my own programs and things, I don't do an introduction round. It's not that I'm not interested in who everybody is, it's that I'm very interested. And the one thing that I want to be really sure of is that I don't ask people to identify themselves in some kind of reductionist way. I am a such and such, I live in such and such a place. This is my job, this is where I live. Okay, I know that there's a lot more to you, to me, to us, to who we can be together than these little quick introductions can offer. They're just little quick introductions, no harm done really, but wait a minute, maybe there is. Because then what if you have to live into that? And you've said in the room, "Oh, I'm a lawyer," or "I'm a doctor," or "I work in the da-da-da." And then someone says, "Oh, well, you're a da-da-da." And then you have to speak from that. You have to be from that. And what I'm interested in is who can we be together? To tell you the truth, I'm not exactly sure who I am when I'm with you. I have to discover that, right? If I step on an improvisational stage with you, we're going to have to find out not just who we are, but who we are together. And yes, I see this about in Indigenous places, they introduce in very different ways. And there's a reason why, because otherwise you get disconnected. And the way that we perceive ourselves and perceive each other comes disconnected, decontextualized. There's a violence in that. And on the flip side, there's a healing in allowing for somebody else's world to be full of complexity. Right? So I grew up in the heart of the self-help world of the 70s in Northern California, right? Smack dab in the middle of it. And everybody meant well. There were some good ideas. But by and large, the self-help movement created a mess. And it was always insinuating that you should be more. You could be more. If you did this, 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 and this, you could be better. You could be a better version of you. I don't want you to be a better version of you. I think the thing that I really want to invite is actually the question of not how do I make myself better, but who can you be when you're with me? All right. Now, if you're a musician on stage with other musicians, this is a very real question. Who can this other musician be when I'm playing with them? Yeah. So it's a very different approach because it's starting first of all with the question of how do I create the conditions that allow you to be in your complexity? How do you create the conditions that allow me to be in my complexity? In other words, are we holding each other trapped in ideas? And if we are, is it possible that we might be able to release those by being together in ways that allow more? I think that's really important right now because the depth of mechanistic habits of thinking are so seductive. And even in the moment of thinking, we want to be collaborative. It's so easy to go to the place of thinking, okay, well, your skill set is this, and your skill set is that, and his skill set is this, and her skill set is that. So if we all do the thing we're best at, we can collaborate in a way that's functional. Do you hear that? That's not collaboration. That's mechanism. All right. What we're looking for is some way in which we can go into a world that is changing before our eyes that we do not understand yet. We don't know what to do. How are we going to do what we don't know what to do together? That's going to require mutual learning. So this process of of opening a way to be together is actually a way to invite mutual learning. Now, when I'm talking about mutual learning, I'm thinking of, here's an example. We're all walking into a forest together and we've never been in this forest before, and we don't know where to go or what it is we're doing in there. We're just there. Mutual learning means you're finding something and I'm learning what you're learning about. I'm learning how you're learning. And I'm finding another thing. And you're seeing that I'm finding something. You're thinking, oh, you can learn like that also. Mutual learning does not mean we're learning the same thing. It means we're learning together in very, very different ways. We're able to receive experiences and to pursue pathways of curiosity and inquiry in very different ways, but we do it together. So we're not trying to come into the same place. We're trying to keep the ecology of our curiosity and our mutual learning in an ecology, which means that all those differences are important. They're going to together generate vitality. Okay, we're only on the first question. We have more questions to go. The old version of leadership is gonna be heroes. And it's, it's seductive. I can't tell you how many conferences I am in or places that I go where someone is essentially trying to be King Arthur, pulling the sword from the stone. I'm going to be the one with the perfect model of how to save the world. Listen to my model. And the intention is good. The heart is there. But the possibility of us finding a single path into this future is, I think, zero. It's a multiplicitous path. It's an ecology of paths. And that's the whole thing. We have misunderstood ecology, and therefore we do not understand ourselves or each other or the world we live in. And so this moving forward is going to require less mechanism, more meadow. So here we go. Kosha, do you have a second question, or do you want me to just dive in?
No, it's fine. I'll come in and just bring some words in, and you can also just continue with your stream of consciousness. It's beautiful. And I feel like it's really touching us. I'm very touched by the simplicity of this listening in the improvisation and really listening to when is my voice needed? When is my tone? And exactly as you were expressing it, which tone of voice is needed when my voice is needed? It's so much more than just when is my voice needed. It's also which tone of voice. What is the next movement that is wanting to come through that supports the whole movement to move forward? And it's such an intuitive and deeply sensitive way of interacting. And I think that many of us have a taste of this sometimes in our teams, in our families, in our partnerships, in our conversations, that this kind of flow in a way is unfolding. And and it becomes, and then suddenly it's gone again, right? So this is, I think, where the trauma-informed aspect is interesting, because we would say that where trauma is healed and we're fully in our natural selves is where that natural flow is happening. And where the natural flow is broken and stopped is where we're hitting layers of trauma that are also searching to be integrated. And as you just spoke about the old notion of leadership, and I know in your, and how you write about it, you speak about hero envy and how contest divides us, competition and contest. And we all know this so well. We know it again in our relationships, we know it in our teams, and it comes up so fast. The sense that I need to protect my idea, maybe somebody will steal it, or just feeling less than, more than, insecure. And also as a woman, in the world, finding our voice, trying to bring our voice in those moments where we feel called and then maybe not feeling received, or finding it hard to get the moment exactly right, because there's been such a long time where we were told to, I was told as a girl that women should be seen but not heard, so a lot of us carry these stories. So how have you found, and how are you finding your voice in those moments where your voice needs to be heard? In this complex world, the liminal world, also that is still often based on an old notion of leadership.
Okay, this is a really interesting question, and it pushes me to it's kind of a wordless place, so it's hard to put words on where does your voice come from. I have an interesting situation. My interesting situation is that my father's voice is very academic, and people might think, well, you had an entry, you had a name, and you had an entry, and so it must have been easier. But exactly the opposite was true. When I was a kid, I would get introduced, and actually, to tell you the truth, that sometimes still happens, as Gregory Bateson's daughter. I'd be like, yeah, and my name is Nora. I have a name. I'm a somebody. So I am constantly criticized for not being academic enough, and constantly criticized for being too academic, for being too intellectual and not intellectual enough, for somehow not being in either camp. And I am going to remain. My work is a combination of poetry and art and story and science and research, mixing in ways that are going to be unique every time. They must be unique every time. How can you begin to want to learn about a complex world without allowing that study itself to be shaped by the process and the context that you're in? How do you do that? We live in a world that insists that that methodology has to be a particular kind of methodology, and it has to have measurements, and it has to be repeatable, and it has to have definitions, and it has to have objectivity to make it true. But if you have all those things, what you don't have is a living world, a living person, a living family, a living meadow that is changing, that is different from different directions, that is absolutely not objective. That you can't repeat the same experiment twice because it's changing, because it's alive. So coming into a living world, what I have found is that the only way to really be in that expression is as in a kind of portraiture, in a way of expressing, right? So when I made this film about my father, it was a really interesting process because I had to figure out how to use the film medium to describe him without killing him. How do you describe a living system without killing it? How do you describe a living system so that it can keep changing? So how could I describe you in a way that you could keep changing? How can I describe me in a way that I can keep changing? So that what we're actually doing is communicating in a living form. So finding a voice in that has been and continues to be a challenge. It's also healing, even just finding that voice, even playing with the voice, even experimenting, and sometimes I'm not very good at it, and other times it just something beautiful happens. First and foremost, that voice comes from something so intimate. That's the first thing. It comes from some texture of experience, some resonance that I'm inside holding very carefully. And when I express from there, describe from there, voice from there, I'm describing in a language of closeness, not a language of distance. And that language is going to open up entirely different ways of perceiving. If I want to talk about things, and I work with, complexity and systems theory and all that stuff, and people are always talking about that. It's about, and it's over there. And we can talk about the system, and we can draw diagrams of the system, and we can forget that there is no outside. There is no over there. And this abouting becomes sterile. It's useful sometimes, but don't forget that the minutiae and the detail of life as it is today and tomorrow, when you have to make that phone call and you have to push 1 for this and 2 for that and 3 for this and 4 for the other thing and 9 to repeat the options, that you are a you, and that we are actually living here. So for me, I think that finding a voice has been a return to the intimate, the personal. It's not personal, it's intimate. Okay, there's a difference. what's intimate is something that's very, very close, but has the whole world in it. And my personal is going to start, it can get very I-oriented, me-oriented. And this thing is bigger than that. It's so close. If you go deep enough, you get beyond that. Yeah. And of course, that is going to be my whole experience, my life, my ancestry, my history, my microbiome, the place that I'm from, the way that I am in the day. And it's all going to be there, including the trauma. And I think that as I'm watching my daughter find her voice, it's interesting to think about how, as a mother, we are in this together intergenerationally. And I remember when she was young and she would ask very testy questions. And to some of the people that we were around, it looked like she was being disrespectful to me. But I felt nothing but respect from her challenging, that she knew she could challenge me. And that it was perfectly okay, because I was thrilled to learn things from her and learn things with her. And there were times when she learned things from me and with me, of course. But there was one time when, if you have teenagers, this experience. And I walked into her room and there were clothes all over the floor. I don't know why teenagers keep all the clothes on the floor, but they do. And everything was on the floor. And I walked in there and I said the thing that mommies say. Okay. Oh my gosh, I, get you all this stuff and you throw it on the floor and no, 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 no. And she turned to me and she said, "You can't tell me how to live my life." Just red hair, wild green eyes. And I looked at her. And okay, the teleprompter comes up with the cultural script, right? And the first one says, option number 1, as long as you're living under my roof, young lady, I have the right to tell you how to live your life. Okay, let's don't say that. Option number 2, don't speak to me in that tone of voice. Blah, blah, blah. I don't want to do that either. And meanwhile, I looked at this beautiful being, this gorgeous fire woman coming into this life. And I thought, forget the room, keep the fire. Throw away the clothes, but keep the fire. And I turned to her and I was like, you're right. I don't have the right to tell you how to live your life. And she was not expecting that. I mean, I wasn't expecting that. It was absolutely improvisational. It was only in that moment, that breath. And she was ready for a comeback. She was like, I could see, she was like, oh, wait, did you say that? That you're not going to tell me how to live my life? And I smiled and I looked at her and I was like, yeah, I said that. I said that. And she looked at me and I looked at her and we started to laugh. And something really incredible happened in that moment. We learned together that we could get off the script. that I could stand up for her fire, even in the face of the script of motherhood telling me that's not how you parent your teenager. And, maybe not every day, but on that day, in that moment, with that girl, in that relationship, in the complexity of that, this is not a model. This is not a methodology. This is two people in a moment responding to that moment. And in that moment, what was on the line was more than the clothes on the floor. And we learned that we could go off script together, and that it was fun, and that, that well-behaved women don't make history, and we could be ill-behaved women together. And it was really a shift in what was possible in our relationship. Okay. So very often with communication, we get caught in what is said or what is not said. But that's not where the communication is. All right. You can look at a transcript of a conversation and think, well, that's what was said, and that's what was not said. But I really want to say that the most important part of the communication is what it was possible to say. What it was possible to say is not written anywhere, but it limits and shapes everything. Who is it possible for you to be? What's it possible to communicate? And there will always be limits. And those limits will make resonances. They will create tonalities. But pay attention to that, because it's really easy to mistake what was said for what was possible to say. And where is that held? Okay, this is that thing I'm talking about. That thing we're holding between us. The what's possible to say it's not the law. It's not, it's where is it? So what happened between my daughter and I in that moment was that what it was possible to say changed. And we both responded in an entirely different realm of possibility. It's one little example, but our days are filled with those moments where we forget and we just sort of slide by on the script. I just repeat the thing that I think is the right thing to say. And I am not paying attention to the improvisation. I'm not tending that space in between. I'm not moving the possibility realm.
Yeah, beautiful, Nora. That's a beautiful story and a beautiful invitation to stay closer to that realm of possibility of speaking from intimacy, from that deep intimacy within us. And, time is passing so fast while you share with us. So I think this might be our last question that I bring in.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see how we go. But I would love to bring in a question that, I'm sorry, I forgot to Liana brought, because I think this is really helpful for us, because sharing from those intimate places, even with your daughter, there's an edginess to it, to not following the script.
Yeah.
And even more so if there's in some way, and even with your daughter with a room full of clothes, it can feel threatening, right? To your way of life, to being a good mother, to I don't know what. But if we multiply that to being in the world, to being in a what is still often a male-dominated environment where people are looking at you as the daughter of Gregory Bateson, and why don't you behave like this? And they're not really open to hearing you go off script. They're not listening to the nuances of your voice and the depth that you're coming from. So Leanne is asking, how can we dare to speak from this intimate place, to open up and let the word come from this place of intimacy when there is fear in us as a woman to speak up, to show myself, to make ourselves vulnerable?
Yeah. Okay. This is a really interesting question. And I was somewhere recently and people were talking about courage, courage, courage. You got to have courage. Everyone's got to have courage, 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 courage. And I really started to ask myself, what's courage? Because I am so vulnerable out there in the world all the time. And so many moments have happened where I have just been demolished by that world of, I call it the clicking sounds. There's this like very technical realm of language and communication that is so prefabricated and flat, and it goes clickety, 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 click. And still, I think that what pulls me isn't an urge to go out there and do it, that thing. It's in a way, maybe it's love, it's care, it's concern of what happens if I don't. What happens if I don't? And so I feel not that I'm pushing myself into the world, but that I'm being pulled in by tending those moments where, metaphorically speaking, the alternative is walking barefoot on the broken glass. Like the breaking has been so intense. The destruction and the violence and the exploitation has been so much. How can I be silent? So I don't really know how to say where that comes from. And I like that you use the word dare, because it's an interesting word. And of course, courage is, the heart. That's the heart. But I think somewhere we have in our mythologies this idea that you have to like stoke up your bravery to march into a room of dragons and slay them. And that's not where I live. I'm in some pretty big roomfuls of some pretty big dragons. But what I have found is that I'm not in a rush. I'm not trying to be popular. I'm not trying to have somebody commend me or give me a gold star. any more than the bacteria in the soil are trying to get credit for the cabbages, any more than the compost is trying to get credit. But I'm here. Here I am. And everything I do and everything I don't do, everything I say and everything I don't say, every way that I gesture, every tone of voice, every moment that's funny, every rage, every funky thing is going to bring something to the soup of our being, some flavor to the soup of our being. What am I bringing? How am I tending? What flavor are you holding afterwards? What opens? What closes? So I hear you. And there's something really weird that's happened in our world where recklessness takes the room. Wisdom and consideration, sensitivity and sensitized attention seem to get steamrolled by recklessness. We have to hold this together now. I can't tell you how many rooms I've been in, boardrooms or whatever else, and one person comes in with their, well, and just, what's it possible to communicate after that gets shrunken into this tiny little reductionist disaster. And so how then to come into that space, recognize what's going on, and open. So that's where we are. We're living in a world that does defer to recklessness. And if you are going to be there in a way that allows there to be warmth, healing, shifting. And that doesn't mean even speaking up. Sometimes you can do that in absolute silence. Sometimes you do it just by shifting your body in the room. Sometimes you do it by saying something funny. Sometimes you do it by blasting off yourself. There's no one way. There's no perfect formula for this. It's about paying attention to what's happening in the communication, in the context that you're in, and then bringing your voice in an ecology of communication. What are you bringing in the ecology of communication? What's it possible to grow here? Yeah. I hope that helps. It was a really good question.
Yeah, I feel like it's beautiful and we could go much deeper, and maybe this is also a really good starting point for us, and there is something about this, where once we've come to that intimacy that you are speaking about, which is in a way a very deep point of connection with ourselves, but also the context that we're in. I find that it's sometimes so natural to speak that voice, And it's, I'm really curious how to spend more of my life in that place. And the other thing that because I notice that the anxiety in me, or the fear, the anxiety in me actually comes up when I'm not in that place, which is also just, interesting in the edge work to really notice that it's actually when I'm not deeply connected to that intimate place in myself and speaking from there that I feel anxiety. Yeah.
I think it has to do with this the presupposition that if you speak from a distance about things in generalities, that you can have a potent voice in a world of distance and generalities. The thing is, we don't actually live in a world of distance and generalities. We actually live in a world of us, human beings, just trying to get to tomorrow and next week, bring up their daughters and clean up the room and tend to the really, really hard things that have come before. So the world of that complexity is a world of possibility, and it may seem dangerous, but I would like to suggest that it's the only safe place. It's the only place where the reductionism and the violence of reductionism is lessened. So, I guess we could stop there. But.
Yeah, well, wonderful. And I promised you that we wouldn't keep you for too long tonight, even though I know we could easily continue. Every time we speak, I feel like we touch deeper places, Nora, or you just keep changing so much that every time I meet you, I meet a deeper world, a deeper version of the world through you. So thank you so much for being this shape-shifting depth, of a world that you are. And we want to offer a little bit of space now also just to check in about the course that we're planning and any questions that people have to that. I think there have been so many amazing quotes growing out of this. I myself tried to capture some. I saw people trying to capture some. We might need to do a transcript of this call with you just because it was so rich. And I really look forward to continuing this conversation in regular intervals. I also feel that the work you do in the liminal spaces of interrelating, interdependency, and the work that Thomas Hübl does on these same topics and the spaces that arise between us is just really nourishing to play with and listen to, and allow our instruments to resonate with. So huge thank you to you for being here with us tonight, and I look forward to continuing the conversation in a multitude of ways, but very definitely in October in preparation of your next book, Combining.
And there's a chapter called Ecology of Communication in there. So
so huge appreciation for you in this community. And
well, right back at you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being with me tonight. And may we have the chance to improvise some more. Yeah. Thank
Yeah,
you, Kosha. It was
beautiful.
wonderful. And thanks to our translators today, too. I really appreciate your efforts.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Nora, and we will be inviting you in back to us.
I look forward to it. Take care, everybody.
Much love, much love.